The English Channel, the world's busiest shipping lane. Every day, tens of thousands cross it by ferry. It's a safe, routine trip. Until one ship capsizes just over a kilometre outside port. Within 90 seconds, hundreds of people are fighting for their lives in the icy water. 193 died in Britain's worst maritime accident since the Titanic. The day after the tragedy, investigators take a boat out of the capsized Herald. It's a shocking sight. The ship appears to be intact. On the ship's visible side, they see no immediate sign of collision or damage. But what they see at the Herald's bow astounds them. The huge bow doors that allow vehicles on and off the ferry are wide open. It's clear to the investigators that water must have poured through these gaping doors. The media dubbed the open bow doors the doors of death. Ian Dadd's team need to find out why the doors are open.
We thought at the time that perhaps she might have hit something, which would have caused it to capsize, or she could possibly have got very close to one bank or other of the approach channel to Zeebrugge.
The team know that the Herald came to rest on a sandbar about 1 kilometre from the harbour entrance. There are several of these underwater obstructions just outside Zeebrugge. To avoid them, ships follow a marked channel 900 metres wide that port authorities keep clear by constant dredging. So did the Herald collide with the sandbar, causing fatal damage to her bow doors? Investigators discover that the Zeebrugge Port Authority routinely tracks all ferries by radar up to about 3 kilometres from the harbour. It shows the Herald going off course in her final moments, but the radar data reveals that she doesn't hit the sandbar. In fact, as she capsizes, she settles onto it. The ship veers off course because she was already in trouble. The sandbar is not a nemesis, but a savior. It stops the ship turning turtle, saving many lives. Investigators realize the theory that the bow doors were damaged by a collision is a dead end.
Herald of Free Enterprise.
They interview Port Authority personnel on duty the night of the disaster. It gives them a new lead. Port Controller Guido de Ruder relates a strange report he received from the captain of the dredger Sanderus 20 minutes after the Herald left port.
He told me that he could see lights, and he thought that the bow doors were still open, that he could see cars and trucks through the bow doors.
It's staggering news. It appears to investigators that the Herald actually left port and set out to sea without closing her bow doors. How could this happen? To find out, they questioned surviving crew members who worked on the car deck that night. They learned that it's the job of First Officer Leslie Sable to supervise the loading of vehicles. It's also his responsibility to get the Herald loaded swiftly so that it can depart on time. If he fails, he could be reprimanded by his bosses.
It was such a difficult market to make a lot of money in, and of course one got commercial success by turning the vessels around very quickly.
30 minutes to disaster. The team discover that tonight Sable is under pressure. The cheap ticket deal means the car deck will be full. As the last car rolls onto the ship, the call is announced for harbour stations.
Stations, all stations. Herald of Free Enterprise, about to leave the harbour, proceeding outwards.
This is the signal for crew to go to their positions for departure. Lee Cornelius's final duty on the car deck is to put a safety chain across the bow doors. First Officer Leslie Sable hurries to the bridge. They're now 5 minutes behind schedule. He is the last to leave the lower deck. Harbour Stations is also the signal to close the bow doors using a hydraulic control lever on the car deck. Investigators discover the responsibility for this crucial job falls to Assistant Boatswain Mark Stanley.
Stations, all stations.
But when they question Mark Stanley about his actions that night, they're in for a shock. When he should be on the car deck closing the bow doors, Mark Stanley is still asleep in his cabin. He took a nap after the ship docked in Zeebrugge, but slept through the call for harbour stations.
The Enterprise is about to leave the harbour. Proceed.
But the investigators are puzzled. Why does no other crew member notice that the bow doors are wide open and raise the alarm? They learn that who closes the doors and when is a hit-and-miss affair, as crew member Lee Cornelius recalls.
Sometimes when we left and completed loading, one of the guys on the main deck would shut the bow doors. But that night we didn't. We just left them open and expected Mark to come and shut them when we'd finished.
The bow doors are left open because the assistant bosun is asleep, and on this night, no one else does the job for him. The investigators find that there is no fail-safe system for closing the bow doors. Although it's Mark Stanley's job to shut them, it should be double-checked by First Officer Leslie Sable. But in the race to stay on schedule, it was normal practice for the First Officer to leave the car deck before the doors were closed.
The officer who was to have done this checking had to also at that time be on the bridge, so he had to be in two places at once, which of course was impossible.
Dan and his team discover another major flaw in the system. The captain cannot easily see the bow doors from the bridge. So unless a crew member tells him otherwise, he automatically assumes they are closed. "23 minutes to disaster. Captain Lurie backs out of berth 12. He's totally unaware that no one has closed the 5-meter bow doors on the car deck. It's clear to investigators that a combination of human error and poor systems causes the Herald to sail with her bow doors open. 4 minutes to disaster. Unaware that the bow doors are wide open, Captain Lurie ups the Herald's speed half a knot to 18 knots. In the shallow water of Zeebrugge's harbour, this makes the bow wave dramatically bigger. 90 seconds to disaster. 2,000 tons of water flood the ship's open car deck. 60 seconds to disaster. As the water surges across the car deck, passengers feel a violent lurch. Now the wave starts to carry cars and trucks with it. 30 seconds to disaster. The ship tilts 30 degrees to the left. It's the point of no return. The ship turns on her side to lie half submerged in the icy waters of the North Sea. 7 weeks after the tragedy, salvage tugs tow the Herald to port. The final death toll is 193, including 38 crew members. The investigators' final report finds that the Herald's loss is largely down to human error. Captain David Lurie is suspended for a year. First Officer Leslie Sable for 2 years. And the man who failed to close the bow doors, Assistant Bosun Mark Stanley, is found seriously negligent but escapes further punishment. The report finds that ultimately, poor management by the Herald's owner, Townsend Torreson, is to blame. The British Department of Transport hits the company with a £400,000 fine. The disaster led to a major rethink of safety measures on British car ferries. Closed-circuit TV cameras now allow captains to see the bow doors from the bridge. And indicators also tell them when the doors are closed. Shipping companies must modify their vessels to improve stability with features such as dividing bulkheads. It means that if a ship takes on water, it must be able to survive for at least 30 minutes without capsizing. The Herald of Free Enterprise disaster was a wake-up call to the maritime industry. The safety regulations it prompted have set a new high standard for the world to follow.